Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the second lesson of Sapanta's Intensive Exam Acceleration Program for English Language Units 3 and 4. So this is session 2. This is part of that very imperative groundwork that we kind of call the necessary foundations that we're going to build so that for the next 8 sessions, everything that I say, every concept I bring up, every nuance I find in different transcripts, or every different type of essay I try to show you guys, it'll be a more cohesive process. Whether you're here for a refresher, whether you're here for a raw 50, or whether you're here for a raw 25, all of this is completely necessary across the board. Because if you don't know these principles, then you cannot develop them. Now, even in this lesson, I want you guys to challenge me. I want you to ask me questions that you have that provide nuance to this. I want you to find every opportunity to extend yourselves and ask me things that'll allow everyone else to also benefit from these concepts, right? A lot of learning must come from the students who have questions, right? Because I could talk for 2 hours, but if you guys don't ask me questions, who has more yield here? I want you guys to drive the questions and I will deliver the content, right? So please, please, please always be, concentrating and thinking of, okay, hold on, what could I possibly ask here that could extend my understanding? Or what could I ask that could help everyone else as well, right? This is a team effort. And ultimately we are a class. And I don't want this to be some sort of monologue just on one end and you guys just remain silent for the 2 hours, right? I want cooperation and I also want to see that you guys are engaged. And if at any point anything is confusing, I'm constantly monitoring chat. Beautiful. So this is where we sit. Lesson 2. Of course, social purpose context register. The meta language that we need to know applies certain resources, but on quite a basic scale. Once again, if we go back here, right? Today, we're laying the groundwork in terms of metalinguistic knowledge and conceptual awareness. Now, if you think about it, yesterday was the gross anatomy. It means on a large scale, right? Of English language, right? Today, we zoom in slightly further. And what you'll realize is as we progress through the sessions, we're going to keep zooming in more and more and more, right? And that's especially going to come into play when we annotate the ACs all together, and I will write ACs for you guys on the spot and pick out all the different things that I would have in my own annotations, right? So before we begin fully, I just want to ask you guys as a bit of a just I want to know like what is purpose in the real world, right? So when we think about the word purpose in English language, right? And we see these factors in the study design, which are really important, right? Really important. These key words that you're seeing here allow you to use them as a conduit, which is kind of like a vehicle or a medium for communicating different purposes and reasoning for communication. But what is purpose in the real world, right? So purpose is, yeah, is that someone who unmuted? Feel free to unmute, by the way, guys. Hey Min, is everything okay? I might mute you. But yeah, if you guys have something to say, absolutely go for it. But anyhow, in the English language world, purpose just means reasoning, reasoning for communication. And we need to define that reasoning by specific words in our writing. Now, these are the specific words that we think about when it comes to this reasoning. So, first of all, the use of informal language for various social purposes might include, as it says, encouraging intimacy. So, what does that mean? Right? Coming closer to people, right? Encouraging people to close social distance between one another, build trust between one another, right? Build affinity to one another, right? Solidarity, though. Solidarity is a little bit different. See, solidarity is more about standing with someone in support in a moment of pain. Equality and encouraging equality is very much about making sure that we are both equal in opportunity, but equal in access, which in a way also upholds to something called equity. These terms are all slightly different, but if you can show an examiner your ability to use them individually, that's where the marks come from, right? So a lot of students will use encouraging solidarity when really they mean building rapport. That's a no-go. That's a really big mistake, right? But if you can use both side by side in contrasting examples, and examiners can see that you understand the duality, both sides of the coin, that's where a lot of the marks come from. And I think that's a real key that I want to put into your notes, guys. So, um, if you can show examiners duality, and show them a contrast in the purposes you opt to talk about, for example, discussing people standing in solidarity alongside the purpose of social harmony, alongside the purpose to build rapport. Examiners will see that you guys understand the nuance. And if you can show them that you understand the nuance slash the subtle gray shades, right? Examiners will feel inclined to mark you higher, right? So English language is a game of showing the subtle differences between little things like solidarity, to rapport, to social harmony, right? Don't neglect either of those three. I think you guys should talk about all of them in the same transcript because in many cases they will come up together. If it's applicable, don't neglect any of them. Talk about all of them, right? So remember that English language, if you want to impress examiners, show them that you understand the minute differences between concepts that a lot of students mix together. Because remember, everything's comparative. When you get marked in English language, you get marked comparatively. Your essay gets moved up if you have a few sentences that are, really insightful compared to someone who doesn't have the few sentences that are really insightful. And remember, each examiner gets a batch of 200. They get paid allegedly $8 to $10 to mark each paper. They're not very interested in reading the stock standard general responses. They're looking at who understands the nuance. And they can learn a lot about that just from a topic sentence, just from a strategic introduction, right? From a strategic introduction of that first example in your first paragraph, right? Now, back here, right? Just to make sure, do you guys feel like any terms on this page are really confusing to you, right? Is there anything here that anyone in this class doesn't understand, right? Okay, by the looks of things, not so much. So just very quickly, maintaining and challenging positive and negative face needs, right? A lot of students also get this mixed up. Negative face needs are your needs for privacy, autonomy, freedom as such, and things like freedom of speech, freedom of choice, which fall under autonomy. And it's very much about not imposing on someone's personal space, right? Not imposing on someone's rights. Whereas positive face needs are your needs to be liked, your needs to be validated, appreciated, respected. So maintaining and challenging positive and negative face needs are very much relevant in, I guess negative face needs come into play when it's more of a formal text. Positive face needs are much more common in informal texts and transcripts. Justin says, when would I use the purpose linguistic innovation? I don't really understand how that's a purpose. That's a great question. Let's discuss this. And Tuisha says, could I please go through the difference between intimacy, solidarity, equality, and rapport? Absolutely, I can. So all right. So at this stage, let's have a look at this. So linguistic innovation, what does it actually mean? It means the purpose of creating neologisms, new words, words that, are descriptivist in nature. So if you have a transcript where, for example, there are young people using neologistic terminology with a purpose to establish in-group or a purpose to produce humor or a purpose to come up with terminology that allows them to evade rules or any sort of new language formation that you can see happening live in a transcript, we can label as a purpose to linguistically innovate, right? There was a text in maybe like 2019 Vika where it's like a radio show and the guy's thinking of new ways to say fry yay. That's a purpose. to linguistically innovate. And in a way that could include Gen Alpha's slang. Like everyone, all my students are talking about skibbity and sigma and all these things. You could say that the use of those, a lot of people online might have a purpose to linguistically innovate because they love constantly coming up with neologisms, and that helps them establish further in-group among their teenage age group, right? Now, as for quickly, the difference between intimacy, solidarity. So intimacy equals bringing people closer to one another emotionally, which is, the same as increasing affinity, right? Um, Now, solidarity equals standing in support of someone in moments of pain, right? Um, Equality equals ensuring everyone has level access and level opportunity, has the same level of access and opportunity to any amenity in the real world, right? Or rather, in society, we'll say. Oh, it's only got one M. Oh, that's interesting. Um, Rapport equals um, building almost, building a greater connection, very much in a trivial, phatic, and kind of trivial, phatic, and social setting, right? So these are all slightly different. Um, Encouraging intimacy and solidarity can very much link together in moments of pain. Equality is a little bit different to the rest because it's on a societal structural scale, and rapport is, as you can see, with phatic function, tied deeply into building a greater connection, right? Just think of it as making friends, right? Building rapport is making friends. Now, um, back here, right? Promoting linguistic innovation, we discussed that. Supporting in-group membership. At the same time, you can support out-group membership. Do not forget that. Anything that closes off the outside demarcates in-group membership and boundaries. As for formal, now guys, keep in mind that these are not actually strictly for informal or formal, right? They very much overlap. Like you can establish expertise in an informal setting in rare cases. Don't think of these as exclusive to the category that Vika has put them in, which is why I really disagree with the study design, and I wish I could have a hand in changing it, right? Because these all mix and match, right? Now, of course, we've gone through positive and negative face needs. Reinforcing social distance is essentially a way of reducing rapport, but really you're putting a hard boundary and you're establishing authority, right? Establishing expertise is just proving to the people around you that you're credible, that you're trustworthy, that you're knowledgeable about a certain topic, that you're educated in that field. Social harmony is more about establishing peace on a societal scale. Negotiating social taboos might be things like, talking about money or talking about sex or, building rapport as well can happen through formal language, of course. Clarification is just the use of referential declarative sentences, right? Delivering any information is clarificational. Manipulation does not always have to be a bad thing. In fact, almost everything is manipulation. Manipulation just means to alter the state of. So when we talk about manipulation, we discuss manipulation to just alter the state of thought of a certain member of the audience, or alter the outcome of a certain scenario, not necessarily to harm anyone, but to better everyone involved. Now, obfuscation is to be untruthful, is to hide reality, is much more linked to having malicious intentions, right? And not being transparent, right? But it's very important to actually remember these through using them. And that's why I've got an exemplar here, right? I want us to have a look at this and have a read through and look at how these purposes are actually used. When we look at this paragraph, right, having evoked a sense of youthful exuberance, the ironic declarative, that 1 week trial lasted 1,283 weeks, overwhelms and clarifies with the reader the tremendous amount of time that has passed since he started writing as an amateur columnist, thereby fulfilling his expressive function and reminiscing purpose. Parallelism evident in every major event, every drab, etc., alludes to the notion that Katz had poured his heart and soul into his articles, building a level of rapport with the reader through emotional vulnerability. Having recorded all the intricacies of his life each step of the way, he reminds readers that the column had become an irreplaceable and treasured part of his life. Hence, the decision to stop writing for the column was undoubtedly a hard one to make. Now, I just want you guys to notice the way that words of the study design are used. Now, this is from my friend who scored a Raw 48, right? Um, and I discovered this by accident one day. We were at uni and we were studying, and he was tutoring in Lang. And I was like, I've actually never seen a paragraph written like that. And I was like, can you send me that? Because I wanna use it as a case study. And when I look at this, right? He uses the exact words of those purposes in the study design, but he expands on it with his own language, with his own articulation. Yes, he has clarifies. Yes, he has, builds, building a level of rapport. But alongside that, he might talk about it in regards to fulfilling his his reminiscing purpose. This is a big one, right? That's not necessarily word for word in the study design, but you have the versatility to come up with these purposes, intentions, and functions of language in your own words. So the lesson here is do not feel limited to what is in the study design. It is actually your job to expand on the words of the study design. You must use it as a starting point and flourish past it. So yes, he says building a level of rapport, but specifically with the reader through emotional vulnerability. Right. So notice how it is not just strictly what is in the study design. It's very important to discuss all the purposes in the study design as a starting point and then build on it with your own understanding, with your own articulation. Another thing that I want you guys to think about here is that, as I said yesterday, when I say immerse yourself in the world of the transcript, this is what he's done. He's really put himself in the shoes of the interlocutor, of this character, of whatever this transcript is. He focuses on that real world. He focuses on how the language has real world implications. The end goal, the tangible matters and parameters are very important. And so he drills deep into the life of this individual, right? So ultimately, you must show that you understand why people use the language that they do. So now I'm going to give you guys an 8 minute clock little countdown, right? Um, I'm going to give you guys an 8 minute countdown starting now, right? Um, how would you guys discuss the following scenarios in regards to those, different purposes and social settings that we discussed? And I want you to put that in chat for me, right? You've got 7 minutes and 40 seconds to go. You've got 3 dot points to fulfill. So these kind of dot points, these arrows are your starting points. I want you to expand on them in terms of social purpose. I want you to explain what's happening, which social purposes are at play from the ones we've learned, from the ones that we've discussed, right? And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, I'm right here. Ask away. Got about 6 minutes. And if you feel like you need an extra minute or two, guys, let me know as a class. Last year, they needed an extra minute or two. I've got a response in so far. I've got one response. You've got 4.5 minutes to go though. But second response in. Wow, very comprehensive, the second one. I might read a little bit of it out just as a bit of a pre-analysis. So, of course, threatening the student's positive face needs whilst simultaneously affronting their negative face needs. And can you elaborate on what you mean by affronting their negative face needs? I want you to elaborate on that because it's a good point, but elaborate on it. Tell me exactly what you mean, but why? Why and how? Um, like if you could have added a sentence like, um, something like, given that he's, circumnavigating the student in communication with the parent, this might, make that student feel neglected or make that student feel unimportant, right? And that might make them feel almost like their privacy has been invaded or things are happening around them that they're not in control of. And that in a way threatens negative face needs. See what I mean when I talk about the going that extra step, finding that extra layer of information that others won't, right? And writing about it in a more nuanced manner than other students, right? All right, guys, about 4 minutes to go now. All right, guys, about 40 seconds to go. Wrap it up slowly. Alrighty. 10 seconds, and then we'll have a look at what we've got. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So I want to have a look at all of the different takes that we have. Good stuff. Good efforts, guys. Well done. And for this part of the lesson, I'm going to move back to the Notion. So we've got 1, right? These are our first set of ideas. This is the second set of ideas, I'll say, right? There we go. This is good. Really good contributions, right? I'm just picking out a few of these. Good. Good. And you guys have also embedded some questions into here, I've seen. In 8 minutes, you guys have done good work for 8 minutes. Well done. Really well done for 8 minutes. This is good work for 8 minutes. Okay, all of them are coming in. This is good. Alrighty. So I'm going to go from the top, and I just want to have a look at the different ideas we have and highlighting them out. So we've got threatening the students' positive face needs whilst simultaneously affronting their negative face needs. Yes, but remember, more detail would be needed here in an AC, right? This amount, or rather this brief amount, does not give the examiner any sense of nuance. So explain to me why a child might feel neglected or circumnavigated if their teacher did something like this. Do you guys understand the perspective better now when I say, this kind of, this nuance idea? So let me just open my window. There we go. My window's open. That's good. And so then you've got building rapport by creating a deeper level of familiarity with the teacher whilst encouraging intimacy. Yeah, nice, nice, nice. But once again, needs more nuance and specificity to the situation, right? Talk me through why the teacher might feel rapport building in this scenario, right? If you want that edge, that next step. Now, reinforcing authority whilst affronting the negative face needs of the little brother. Um, Absolutely. Reinforcing authority, very well done. Affronting negative face needs, yes, correct. And we've also got the expansions to these, which is good stuff, right? So if you can look here, this is kind of the progression into where it's ideal. So if you look at this, stripping control away from the student and when their behavior is discussed, making them feel powerless and undermining their autonomy. This can also be seen as an intrusion to the student's personal space and autonomy. Now, of course, try not to repeat autonomy very close to one another like this because it can come across as a little jarring and repetitive, but well done. Developing a relationship with your teacher can serve an interpersonal purpose of building rapport. Absolutely. It can foster a sense of mutual respect, which may make the teacher more invested in your learning and more willing to provide additional assistance. This is the key. This little sentence here, I want everyone to notice this. Every VCA examiner will read this and go, wow, this is an incredible sentence. I'll green it. I'll make it green just to kind of signify that. Incredible. The fact that you've recognized that it might make the teacher more invested in your learning and more willing to provide additional assistance, you've really immersed yourself in the world of the passage. Look at the analysis that you can create when you really focus on nuance and specificity. This is what I'm trying to teach you guys, and you've encapsulated it very well there. Well done. Reinforcing authority is evident as the disciplinary manner aims to modify your brother's behavior. It involves setting or reinforcing rules and expectations within familiar context. Nice. Now, to inform your parents on what the problem is and hoping to elicit a response that ultimately leads to change. Samantha is also in a position where they are trying to teach the student, but that is being made difficult, and he does not want to get blamed if the student does not succeed. Okay, this is great, but please, ensure your spelling and grammar is as accurate as you can possibly make it, right? So little things like here, this is a little too informal, right? You've got to be very careful of informality. Make sure that your writing is never informal outrightly. So if you look at this, he does not want to get blamed. This is really informal. Like this is like talking, this is far too casual, right? Far too casually worded. Please ensure greater formality, right? That's my feedback there. Now, having a close relationship makes the teacher care more and want the teacher to see them succeed, resulting, yes, okay, nice, good, good. The student may have also felt neglected. Of course, remember that we need capital sentences at the start of our sentences, please. Sorry, capital letters at the start of our sentences. Teacher was not meeting their positive face needs, open conversation. Okay. Now, um, yeah, okay. This is good. You're immersing yourself in the world, but this is far too much of an assumption, right? This is far too big of an assumption, right? Because there is no information to suggest that the student was previously not being given enough information, or attention from the teacher. Change your brother's behavior because he has done something that you see as wrong, but the way of doing it may not meet your brother's positive face needs. Good. I like it. Follow those pieces of advice, though, please. Now, the use of negatively connoted lexemes like irresponsible and incompetent in reference to a student allows him to utilize his position of power to communicate dissatisfaction with the behavior, aiming to enforce discipline and encourage improvement. By staying after class, oh my God, very well written. And you've started it off with utilize the position of power, enforce discipline. What I would have preferred, though, is please use at least one instance of word for word purpose, of a word for word purpose from the studies. Just one instance of a word for word purpose, right? This is really good, but I needed you to tell me something about negative face needs. It's a requirement to get full marks on this little section. And it would be the same on short answer, and it would be the same on the AC. By staying after class to develop a relationship with a teacher, student attends to the teacher's positive face needs. Beautiful. By using polite and respectful language, you might want to put a comma here, right? A positive student-teacher relationship is fostered, promoting trust and connection. The underlying social purpose is to increase academic support, likely incorporating cooperative language to encourage the teachers. We might put an apostrophe here, encouraging. Yep, yes, this is great effort. Look at these takes. The teacher's willingness to help. Huge. Very important to think of it as such, right? Now, though speaking in a disciplinary manner, power dynamics are established as you position yourself as an authoritative figure. I love it. Well done. Assert control and influence behavior. Beautiful. And here, I think what everyone has missed so far is in order to establish greater harmony um, in the home environment, right? In the home slash familial environment. Environment, you might even say necessary for peace of mind, right? Or just something that shows your understanding of the context is very important. Of who else might be there? Are my parents there? Are they affected? Right? Opting for the elevated adjectives irresponsible and incompetent, Samantha establishes authority in light to portray himself as a credible and responsible teacher. Nice. Moreover, the negatively connoted lexemes, positive facings are affected. Recognize the severity. Oh my goodness. This is raw 40 plus level. This is raw 40 plus level writing. A few of you are at raw 40 plus level, don't get me wrong, but this is a flawless response because you have got perfect meta language, elevated adjectives, negatively connoted lexemes. You've shown credibility. You've shown establishing authority, which are word for word from the study design, but you've actually expanded on it by talking about the responsible teacher, right? And then you've got threatens positive face needs. You are an extremely high level student. Well done. As a conduit to achieving a better study score in ATAR, the student stays back after class in hopes for the teacher to clarify. Um, more obfuscating. Okay, this doesn't work here. I appreciate your creativity, but obfuscating as a present tense verb does not fit here, right? Confusing was more than enough. Obfuscating just doesn't hold the meaning that you think that you're using here. Obfuscating is a lack of transparency with a subtle intention to be malicious, right? Or be dishonest. So it has nothing to do with dishonesty. So be careful. This allows the student and teacher to encourage solidarity. If you're going to say solidarity, you have to say something like, given that Sapanta um, or rather, given that the student is in a period of academic difficulty, right? Otherwise, solidarity would make no sense if you didn't define parameters of difficulty. Guys, keep that in mind. Solidarity would not make sense unless there is some form of difficulty, pain, or trauma to be given support for. So if you're going to say solidarity, it must link to something like, given that the student is in a period of academic difficulty. Um, Yes, and great job. Really good incorporation. Sapanta aims to impede on the positive face needs of students' parents by indicating his disapproval of certain behavior. Now, this is good, but you need to explain to me how the students' parents' positive face needs are affected more than the students. It's true, but how? This may be, or rather, this is due to the fact that parents, children, um, children can be seen as reflections or representations of of their parents and upbringing, right? So therefore, it can reflect badly on them and affect their positive face needs to be respected and like. And that's why they might feel embarrassed. Hence why embarrassment might be an emotion at play here. Now, notice how important it is to have a high emotional intelligence, right? And really think through empathetically about how people feel and what certain language achieves in the real world, right? Huge pointers here. This is good stuff. This is exactly what I was looking for. Well done. But just please, all these little red bits in these notes, like, please remember them because if you can show these little pointers on the exam, you take yourself that one level above everyone else. If there's ever an emotional scenario, if there's anything about parents or children, which are common, it was in my exam year, it was in the exam year before me too, right? You may use language that promotes the positive face needs of the teacher to show your appreciation for their work, encouraging them to view you as a grateful student. Nice. And you've got word for word study design, and then you've elaborated. Good. Establishing authority as an older sibling. Nice. By using certain language to outline the boundaries you hold. I mean, to outline the boundaries you hold, sure, the older sibling aims to maintain by expressing their frustrations in an honest manner. Really good. Now, just imagine if we added some linguistic examples in the midst here. Really good stuff. Sapanta's use of negatively connoted lexemes such as irresponsible and incompetent, referentially to allow him to convey disappointment in the students' actions. Given the phone call setting where paralinguistic features cannot be present, oh my goodness. This this is raw 45 plus level thinking. Like, this is incredible. I have to give it a green. Look at this, guys. I want everyone to really notice what this student has done. Given the phone call setting, no one so far has focused on that. That is incredibly high level, that to a point where I cannot even wow. Wow, wow, wow. This is something Like this is honestly, if you want to get a raw 50, this is what you have to be thinking of. This is the level of communication you have to have. If you want to get a raw 50, it's about those types of sentences, right? Picking out the fact that it's a phone call. So paralinguistic features cannot be present to aid delivery and variation, right? Maybe less apparent. The impact of the negative connotations may be enhanced, and therefore the mere words have to be what communicates the depth of the lack of discipline in their child. This is incredible stuff. Wow. Oh my goodness. This is so high level. I'm so happy with this, that you guys have come up with this so that we can all see this and analyze it, right? Great effort. In the second scenario, you might use hedges or politeness markers to mitigate any implications that your request may have on your teacher's negative faces, as well as attend to their positive. Okay. Sure, this in turn contributes to your aspirations of increasing your score and will make the teacher be more inclined to care about you and thus more willing to give their time and support to you. I know that you've written this in very shorthand, informal terms, but obviously ensure this is cleaned up and more professional uh, in exam terms, right? But yeah, I can tell that you definitely know what you're talking. Like, this is an incredible pickup. Well done. That is the level of nuance that gets you to raw 50. Students that get above, 48, 49, 50, this is what they're talking about. These are the types of things that I picked out in my own exam. Sapanta reinforces his authority to threaten the negative face needs of the student as an educator who's like irresponsibility, breaching the privacy existing between tutor and student. This is a great way to phrase it. I love that. Um, that's okay. If you want to speed up your writing process, especially because you were typing, so I wonder what your handwriting speed is like, right? So once again, when it comes to handwriting speed, write smaller. Write smaller equals write faster, right? If you write smaller, you write faster. I'd recommend that. Other than that, it really just comes down to practice and reading high level work so that the ideas are pre-prepared in your mind from your practice, right? Um, so the use of negatively connoted adjectives such as irresponsible and incompetent, the use of negatively, yes, 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 challenges students and beautiful. Nice. And so the reason why I brought up this example is because it is both positive face needs and negative face needs that are individually affected. And I wanted to see that duality. I wanted you guys to do the push and pull that I was talking about to show the examiner, hey, at the same time, it might be positive and negative. Let me show you that I understand the difference. And that is what takes you to that level. Developing your relationship will lead to the building of rapport, nice, close social distance, authority. Yes, incredible. Ultimately leading to a higher of a higher chance at a better school or something of the sort here. It doesn't guarantee a better school, so you've got to be careful. Establish authority, conveying my frustration. Make sure you bring up the little brother. Make sure you viscerally mention the little sibling, right? If you're going to talk about it, immerse yourself in the world of that, right? Um, Negatively connoted adjectives, irresponsible and incompetent. Garner, this has to be singular, not plural. An immensely discerning disposition upon the parents, clarifying, rare to bring. Haven't seen many students use that for this activity. Interesting, well done. Because it's true, it does clarify that their child is that, but it might not be the most salient. So you've got to make sure that you back it up with face threatens but you've got to tell me which face. Positive or negative, guys. If you make this mistake, it's a big blunder, right? Never forget to actually tell me positive or negative face, right? Big, big, big blunder. That's a really big blunder, right? Make sure you tell me positive or negative. The use of negatively connoted lexemes, irresponsible, incompetent, challenges the positive face needs of the student, as it has a negative impact on the way that he is seen, as positive face refers to everyone wanting to be liked. Your flow is a little bit repetitive, I feel, because you've got as. Words like furthermore or subsequently come in really handy when you come across as kind of repetitive like this. Coming off as repetitive is a pretty big deal, actually. I would do everything I can if I were you guys to avoid it, right? You really don't want to come across as repetitive because examiners remember things that are repetitive because repetition upholsters memorability and reinforces those ideas. Um, Negative, irresponsible, yes, positive face needs. But this is also vague. Impact on the way that he is seen. What does this even mean? What do you actually mean by this, right? Expand. Tell me the real world implications, right? Right. Might it make the student feel upset, right? So, take me to that next level of information. And I've got a question in chat. It's talking about what you guys actually need to get to that raw 45 level. It's nuance. It's finding the details and focusing on the details. Really figuring out and thinking, hold on, logically, if we're on a phone call, the words hold the most weight because you can't make eye contact over a phone call. And bringing that up is something that many students will not bring up. And that's why it's highly valuable. Threatening students' face needs, which face needs, right? Positive or negative, right? You have to clarify. If you don't clarify, examiners will assume that you don't know. Anything that remains vague or unclarified, anything that remains vague or unclarified, um, or not clarified adequately, is assumed to be due to a lack of knowledge by the examiner. This is like very, very important. Anything that you don't adequately define. Hold on, let's make it heading 3. Let's make that big. I want this to be proper. Everyone to be able to see that. Big writing. So clarifying what the student doesn't know whilst building rapport with the teacher through the use of jargonistic terms, mutual end goal of student increasing their mark. Sure. Reinforcing authority whilst challenging negative face needs. Yeah, this is good. The imposed upon is a really good way to put it. Imposed upon. Good vocabulary choice. Threatening the student's positive face needs through utilizing negatively connotated lex seems irresponsible and incompetent. Through staying back after class, the aim was to build rapport, reduce the social distance. Yes, but you need to talk about the real world. Tell me what implications this has on the student's end goal, the desire to increase in score slash mark availability, right? That's what we're going for here, right? Identify the end goal. Very important to do so. Otherwise, it's not good enough. It's far too vague. The examiner will assume that you just did not know. And when they assume that you just did not know, they cannot give you the mark, right? Negatively connoted lexemes, right? But tell me about the real world implications. Oh, it's so important to talk about the real world implications. This is not specific enough, right? The specific real world implications, which ultimately reinforces authority whilst challenging the positive face needs of the little brother. Yep, authoritative towards the little brother. Reinforces authority. Okay, this is repetitive. You can't use the same word in the same sentence twice. You cannot use the same word in the same sentence twice. Examiners take marks off for that. During phone call to one of his students' parents, this needs one of his students, but you're kind of saying it plural, so make sure that you have the apostrophe. Um, we'll put it like this, one of his students' parents, right? Tutor Sapanta uses negatively connoted lexemes when describing the student's behavior. Sapanta's use of these hurtful lexemes, okay, negatively connotated lexemes is not good enough. I'm banning these words as part of your quotation descriptions. I'm banning term, phrase, lexeme, word. Guys, I'm banning these. You cannot use these. I'm banning them. Like I'm just no go. No go, not at all. They're not allowed. Right? They're just not allowed. I'm not allowing you to write these. It's just not good enough. You have to use metalanguage. That is, at the very least, you must give me word class for any and every example. So not good enough. Prepositional is absolutely okay to use. Um, for analysis, should be pretending that the little kid is repeatedly asking why. Why would we pretend that the little kid is repeatedly asking why? No, you can't assume that. Just because there's frustration, you can't assume that. And yes, I can put the Notion link into chat. Um, Hold on a second. Now, let's have a look here. A student stays back after class to converse with the teacher, in the hopes of stretching their relationship. Stretching relationship means weakening relationship. If you stretch something thin, it means it's weakened. That makes no sense. Please, please make sure when you write something, you know what it actually means, because the examiners will pick up on that, right? And they're looking for every reason to take marks off you, not reasons to give you marks. But they'll disagree. But trust me, when they're sifting through the top papers, they are finding things to take off. In my first SAC in year 12, I got 94. In the second one, I got 100. The difference was one sentence between me and the next person each time, right? Now, aims to challenge positive face needs by reprimanding inappropriate behavior of student. Aims to challenge positive face needs by reprimanding the inappropriate behavior of the student, aiming to inform the parents. This is not, that does not need an apostrophe of yep, yep, yep. Why my? Why have you assumed that it's yourself? Oh, because I've said it's your sure, 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 but you can't say that in an essay. You can't be anecdotal in an AC like that. You can be anecdotal in an essay, but not in an AC. By staying back to have one-on-one supporting aims to build intimacy, yes, the purpose is to reinforce authority as an older brother. Yes, challenging my brother's negative face leads to challenging his independency. Do not repeat challenging here. Do not repeat words in the same sentence. Also, expand on the real world implications and emotional emotional outcomes, right? Slightly, it's about that emotional intelligence. Show that you understand that. Beautiful. So we've learnt a lot of things here, right? And these are only things that, this is kind of like the process of becoming a doctor. And like me personally, in medical school, I might have spent a day in a GP clinic a couple of weeks ago, just watching the GP talk to 60 patients that day. And there are certain things that are truly only memorizable or memorable in that regard if they come as a result of trial and error, the way that you guys have just displayed. Now, I'm going to put this link back into chat so all of you can access it, right? You guys now have this set of feedback, have this information. You have the little green bits of where you should stick to, how you should approach your writing. And absolutely, it's imperative that you use these notes in your exam prep when it comes to if you need any help on, how do I know that I'm writing good enough? How do I know if what I'm writing is genuinely relevant, right? Below are the responses from each student, right? Beautiful. Duality, right? Now, let's go back to the slides and continue on with our content. That was our little segment on social purpose, right? So, of course, if I'm on a phone call, right, negatively connotated lexemes, right, you might stay back after class to develop your relationship. You might want more support. You might want to increase your score. Might be a disciplinary manner. Does it threaten positive face needs? Your parents might feel embarrassed. Would that lead them to discipline you? Look at the flow chart. Look at the level of thought. Look at the process, right? Aligns with the end goal to improve your behavior in the classroom setting. If your goal is to build rapport with your teacher, establish in group and close social distance, appeal to their positive face needs to ultimately extract as many marks out of them as possible, right? Or threatening who's the little brother's negative face needs, attempting to guide or control him might take away his autonomy. It might be in line with establishing authority and imbalance relative power. But the end goal is little brother to not act up. So by now, I want all of this to fit into this puzzle. That this is not just English language. We're really learning the keys to analyzing life, our surroundings, the world around us. Because even after high school, everything takes on this format and everything can be viewed under this analytical lens. And it can help you in a job interview. It can help you in negotiations of a certain contract. It can help you if you're just trying to communicate to an elderly person on the tram who has hearing difficulty, the specific strategy that you use around your vocabulary in a given academic context at university. So this class is more than just English language. I want you guys to think of it as, a form of philosophy. I want you to consider all of this to be real life implications that will go forward to the time that you die. Like what, because that's what life is, right? So we're constantly communicating. If you want to truly understand this subject, you have to think of everything's in human terms. Don't be robotic. Don't go in there thinking, oh, I just have to quote these social purposes and get it over and done with. Really absorb yourself. Try to embrace it and figure out what these people are feeling in these transcripts, what they're trying to communicate, what are their end goals, what is that a part of their human nature? We feel greed, we feel selflessness, we feel selfishness. We might feel a desire to be altruistic and help people through our language. We might feel the desire to achieve a certain career path. Some people do it with toxic intentions. Some people do it by purely working hard and not, trying to find a way to work the system. Figure out the nuances when you read. Think about the people, why they're there, why they're communicating. So now let's move to context, right? You've got cultural context and you've got situational context. As for both of them individually, right? Cultural very much relates to the parameters of society that we have that allow us to fit into our norms. So in Australia, for example, our egalitarian cultural contextual factors are our desires for social harmony, our desires for equality. In Australia, you can, but technically, you could also say that Australians are pretty humble people. We're pretty honest people. We're decent. We're hardworking, right? Or things like tall poppy syndrome, right? We don't really like putting people on pedestals. We like to make sure that we're grounded and everyone is level, right? Whereas situational might be things like function, field, audience, register, relationships, relative power, mode, social purposes, your settings, and your cultural context can be a part of that, and so can tenor. But situational context is literally the situation you're in. So how do we talk about it? So in Australia, you've got honesty. You need, by the way, guys, this is so important. Like these are things you have to talk about in your ACs if you want to get like raw 45 plus raw 50, they look for these things. They look for these nuances, right? I put a genuine, distinct emphasis on my cultural section in my AC, my cultural context. In fact, I had a little sub paragraph that was separated off from my context paragraph all the way at the end that was just 4 lines that focused on every aspect of cultural context I could find in my exam. And what did I talk about? Well, of course, I brought up these factors. Of course, I brought up independence, nurturing community, nurturing youth. And this requires an understanding of the world we live in. But if you don't have that understanding, just take this list and use it. So, in terms of register, it's how you're speaking. How formal or professional are you? How informal and unprofessional are you? It's very much a measure of seriousness, and it links directly to context and social purpose. So these pillars, right, that we have, purpose, intent, function, register, tenor, and context, these 3 pillars, they are the pillars of language that come together to form your knowledge holistically of the subject through essays, AC, and short answer. And as I said, all of them link together. And essays, AC, and short answer are actually all very similar, which was very viscerally displayed in yesterday's lesson. Um, Now, everyone gets access to the recordings. I can't pass out the slides because that is obviously my intellectual property. But yeah, you guys all get access to the recordings and you can click through the recordings if you're looking for any of the slides specifically. Now, let's zoom in a little bit further. So I want to go through a table with you guys. Now, this table is very important. This little table, this piece of paper stayed with me in year 12 everywhere I went. It was literally folded. I had multiple printouts folded and put into every pair of pants I had. And I was quite naughty in year 12. So hold on. Nethmi, who is Metha's little sister, I went to school with Nethmi's big sister, right? Maybe she recalls, but I was not necessarily the most I guess well-behaved student, right? But what I did, I always made sure my grades were good. But when I would go to fashion shows or everywhere I'd go, even if we went to KFC with the boys during third period, I'd genuinely pull out this piece of paper and just in my head go through the meaning of every single one of these pieces of metalanguage and try to use them in a sentence of analysis on the spot in my head constantly every day. You could say I was obsessed with English language, the way that I approached it, right? And this is very valuable. I'm going to put this into the notes, this slide in itself. Um, hold on a second. I want all of you to have this. It's very, very important. Um, and I've also got, I'm not going to talk through this set of notes. These are actually notes that I made in year 12 myself for all of these metalinguistic terms. And I'll actually give, I'll put all of these onto the Notion as well for all of you to have. So you can just access that. It's not a problem. So here we've got this. And they're kind of put into my own colloquial terms, right? Which I think makes it much more memorable and digestible. But yeah, these were like my very hard and fast notes um, from early on in the year when I was trying to get ahead. Um, hold on a second. Here we go. And I'll also put in this one. So really, this whole lesson, the purpose so far is to give you guys all the information you need to thrive, right? Now, if we look at these notes very briefly, let me just point out ones that are, I guess, important or rather, imperative for me to talk through. And let me just approve your requests for these notes, everyone. There we go. Yes, yes, yes. Yep, yep. Perfect. So, do you guys have any queries or questions that stand out when you look at this sheet? Is there anything here that someone has a huge problem with, right? Otherwise, I want to start talking through where, how, and when you should be using these, how you should look for them, where you would be finding them, different examples that come up in different types of transcripts. And I also want to give you guys perspective on how you can guarantee that you discuss 4 subsystems in every AC that you write. So at school, guys, what do they tell you about um, how many subsystems to discuss in your writing? Justin says, why should we focus so much on these? Because isn't achieving nuance more important? The bare minimum is to know these words like the back of your hand, and I'll explain why. That is because you need to mention approximately, based on my recommendation to you guys, if you're going for like a raw 50 level response, you should have around 18 unique AC examples quoted from your transcript. And the 18 examples you have, if you're going for that perfect study score, should be very different to one another, which means you need to know all of these terms like the back of your hand, and you also need to know exactly how to discuss them, right? So Angelina's school tells them to talk about 2 subsystems. Laura tells them to talk about 3 subsystems, right? Um, um, Carissa's school tells her to talk about 2. They're setting you guys up for failure by talking about 2, right? It's definitely not good enough to only talk about 2. Not good enough. Like it is almost impossible to get above a raw 40 if you only talk about 2 subsystems. I'd even argue that, a raw 35 is a stretch to get a raw 35 level response, only referring to 2 subsystems. If you're in my class, I expect you to be discussing 4 subsystems. And I want to teach you guys why that's possible and how you can ensure that you do it every time. So for this, I'm going to go back to the Notion. As you can see, I've given you guys the info dump on everything in the Notion, right? Which is, ready, digestible, perfect, ready to go, so forth. Now, let's have a look here, right? So how can we ensure that we discuss 4 subsystems in every single AC that we write. And I think this in part is what allowed me to also take myself to the next level and score the way that I did among Victoria, right? So it's important to recognize that ACs are just as much about breadth as they are about depth. So breadth of subsystems covered and subsystem slash unique metalanguage covered, as they are about depth of analysis, nuance, and cycle and I guess emotional awareness, as I like to call it, right? And I've got something in chat that says, I often find myself resorting to declaratives because I can't hit the nail on identifying the other ones. How did you avoid this? Practice, my friend. Practice, practice. And I'll give you guys the exact strategy to use. And that's going to be your homework for today, actually. But we'll get to that at the end, right? And we'll talk through that, right? But yeah, don't worry. That's going to be your homework, but we'll talk about that, right? Um, when we get to it, right? So let's have a think, right? If we've got these five subsystems, let's call it, right? And I'll move this to the top so we can see it while we write. Look at this. So phonetics and phonology all only really exists in spoken mode, technically. But in certain cases, you can find assonance in written texts if they're poetic, if they have a poetic function of some sort, right? So if we list out our subsystems, phonetics and phonology, we've got morphology and lexicology. We've got syntax, we've got discourse, and we've got semantics, right? This is like the holy grail, by the way. Like, please make use of this. So phonetics and phonology mainly used, right? So think of it like this. If you have a spoken transcript, it is guaranteed that there will be some form of pitch adjustment, tempo changing, volume slash stress, right? Let me move that back there. Hold on, I want to do it like this. There we go. Right. So some form of pitch adjustment, some form of, tempo changing, volume, stress, right? It is also guaranteed that there's going to be, sorry, it's not guaranteed, but the rest you can look out for, but these are guaranteed. So you have to talk about it, right? Therefore, you must discuss these features, a combination of these features as they are highly salient and impactful on the transcript's delivery, right? Now, when we think about um, connected speech, it's less common, but it comes up, right? But I'm showing you guys what is guaranteed, right? So these are the aspects of metalanguage that are guaranteed in different transcripts you might get that imply that allow you to go in pre-prepared, knowing that if it is, let's say X type of transcript, which could be spoken slash written, formal slash informal, you will know that these features are coming up, or that these features will come up, right? There we go. And I've got a question in chat that says, what do you think about decrease pitch ending of sentence analysis? You should say falling pitch indicates a passing of floor, right? Which we'll get to, right? Falling pitch indicates a passing of the floor. And so pitch, tempo, volume or stress, volume, stress, all of the above, pretty much guaranteed that it's going to come up, right? Pretty much guaranteed. So you're going to have that subsystem covered. Now, what is this imminently linked to? All of these imminently linked to discourse. which means if you're going to talk about prosodic features, volume, tempo, speeding through content faster, all of your spoken strategies and features of spoken discourse very viscerally linked to prosodic features, right? So here, these viscerally link to link to discourse features slash strategies. Bang. So what does that mean? It means we've just knocked out two subsystems simply because the transcript is spoken. That's how I want you to start thinking, right? Now, given that in a spoken transcript, there is guaranteed to be prosodic variation, we must know the analysis of floor management and how it links to volume, tempo, and pitch, right? Very important to do so because we know that you might hold the floor by speaking faster. You can equally hold the floor by pausing in between your writing. You could minimally respond at a lower tempo. You could manage the topic by falling in pitch at the end of the sentence, which indicates a passing of floor, right? You could indicate that that you're turn taking by constantly going from a high pitch to pose a question to a falling pitch after the opponent has answered the question. So if you can understand the links between these prosodic features to the spoken strategies, you're guaranteed two subsystems worth of analysis, right? So if we understand and memorize the links slash um, analysis behind prosodic features intrinsically ushering discourse features and strategies, we guarantee two subsystems, right? Now let's have a look at this so far. Pitch, stress, volume, tempo, pretty much always guaranteed. If they're there, then it means topic management, turn taking, holding the floor, and minimal response are pretty much guaranteed. Turn taking, if there's any more than one interlocutor, there's guaranteed to be turn taking. You've already got eight examples worth of meta-language that can all have very different social purposes that we've learned about just before that we're going to link to, right? And that's two subsystems and eight terms of meta-language that are pretty much guaranteed. But look at this. Openings and closings are also guaranteed in most transcripts because there's an introduction and there's some sort of conclusion. There's some sort of outro, or there's some sort of commencement of conversation. There's some sort of hello, some sort of greeting, some sort of goodbye there might be, right? So think about it. Openings and closings are very common. If it's informal spoken, you're pretty much always going to have discourse particles like. Yeah, well, like, I kind of don't really know, like, what I really want to do, like, tomorrow. What does that do? It holds the floor. It allows them extra time to think and articulate themselves. Maybe it indicates that they're not meticulously pre-prepared in their speech, right? Got a question here. How would I differentiate between pitch and intonation? So pitch is one instance. Intonation is if it constantly happens three times in a row. So if there's falling pitch three lines in a row, you have a falling intonation because you're constantly falling in intonation. But pitch can be just one instance. How do you differentiate between discourse features and strategies? Very simple. Think strategies as conducting the conversation like an orchestra conductor. You bring in people, you stop that instrument, you bring in this person, you take turns between these instruments. But the features of spoken discourse are more like the features of individual instruments. Some instruments might make a certain sound, right? And it's about all of that in the orchestra. So features of spoken discourse are the different instruments you might have in the orchestra, right? Spoken strategies are the way that you can conduct these modes of communication to fit a conversation. That's how I think of it. But yes, obviously you'll have to just memorize it. Because in short answer, they might say spoken strategies, and they mean these. But if they say features of spoken discourse, they mean these. How do you differentiate? Can openings and closings be in written transcripts? Absolutely, they can. Absolutely, openings and closings can be in written transcripts. And that would fall under logical ordering. And now you see how a lot of these are kind of the same thing. But they're just separated because we can't really collude spoken and written text because they're different by nature. But logical ordering encompasses openings and closings, right? Logical ordering is the written version of topic management, turn taking. Does that make sense, guys? Does that open your mind to like how interconnected this spider web is? And it's your job to understand this spider web to really perform in this subject, right? Now, let's move forward, right? And we also know that in informal spoken, it is almost guaranteed to have discourse particles or some sort of openings and closings. So we must memorize these factors, right? Um, Now, as for semantics, actually, before I go there, let's go back to morphology and lexicology, right? So when we think about morphology and lexicology, what is pretty much guaranteed to be there, guys? What do we think? What's guaranteed to be here, right? Morphology and lexicology, what's guaranteed? Word classes? Oh my God. Word classes have to be there if there are words. So you must discuss word classes at some point. Don't worry too much about function and content words. Now, word classes are a guarantee, right? Contractions are also very common. Um, if it's informal, you'll probably see a blend, affixation, suffixation, prefixation of some sort are pretty common. But word classes are what is truly guaranteed every time, right? Word classes are absolutely guaranteed in any spoken or written transcript, right? And if there's word classes, they come together to form sentences. Wow. So what are sentences now a part of? Syntax. So you've already guaranteed four subsystems. You've already guaranteed four subsystems. The only one that might genuinely just not be there and is very difficult to find in any text is semantics. But these four subsystems are in almost every single text. Now, even in a written text, you might find instances of assonance, consonance, rhyme, which might link to parallelism, right, in its own way. So there's those little nuances that you can pick up on. But think about that. Now, the sentences discussed above, no, it's just a label. Word classes are just brought in as labels. But as long as you show as long as you mention the word classes, it shows that you've discussed the morphology and lexicology at play here, right? Morphology and lexicology can also very well just be, elevated slash sophisticated slash polysyllabic noun slash adjective, right? Or whatever it might be, right? Now the sentences discussed above, right, or the sentences formed by the word classes above can be discussed in great depth. And why is that? Because now part of syntax, look at this. We're guaranteed to have declarative sentences in every single transcript. The rest are not so much guaranteed. But it's very common that you have at least two of these. If there's a single exclamation mark, you've already ticked this. And if there's a single question mark, you've also ticked that. If there are all four sentence types, you should mention all four sentence types by the time you get to the end of your AC, right? You should aim to mention as many of the sentence types. Remember, sentence type is different to structure by the time you finish your AC. How would I recommend practicing identifying word classes to ensure not doing it incorrectly in the exam setting? Should I just get a transcript and label it by checking it? Would there be a more efficient method? I'll tell you what to do. And I'll just say it now. This was meant to be your homework, but clearly you guys would like to know this. So what I would do is I would look at a transcript and I would go through it and I'd look at line one. And I'd say, okay, I'm looking at line one and I'm going to compare line one to this table. Let's go from the top. Okay, pitch. Okay, it's spoken. Is there any pitch here? No. What's next? Stress. I'm not seeing any stress. Volume. I'm not seeing any change in volume. No tempo, no intonation. Um, Is there any alliteration, consonants, rhyme, assonance? No. Um, in the first line. Now, in the second, okay, what word classes can I see? Okay, there's definitely word classes that I can talk about. Australian, that's a proper noun that's quite salient. The contraction, you are, there's a contraction here, as I said, right? And obviously, some form of adverb. Okay, well, obviously there are um, different aspects of morphology and lexicology that I've found. What else can I find? Can I find any acronyms in line one? No. Can I find any blends? No. Can I find any initialisms? No. And I go through that for everything. And essentially, that conditions you to being thorough and also having experience in genuinely finding these terms in a transcript format. And if you can do that, then what can Vika put in front of you that you're not ready for? Because you've gone through transcripts and you've really picked them apart hair by hair, by the microscope, finding needles in haystacks, right? And yeah, that's how I would recommend practicing it. Looking at each line and going back to the table and filtering out which one of these work for it. And for whichever one works for it, can I make any analysis? Is there anything that's of note that affects anyone else in this text emotionally? Does it fulfill an end goal of C? Which end goal does it fulfill? Now I'm practicing social purposes. What functions might C have? Oh, now I'm practicing my functions and my contextual factors and the audience and where might it be and who's speaking and what register is it? Wow. And you just happen to start writing an AC by accident, right? And that's actually very technically what linguistics in uni is like. Linguistics in university is just a free form of picking out every little nuance you can chronologically with not that much structure in their analytical commentaries. Remember, analytical commentaries don't have a prescribed structure. It's free flowing. It's about your perception. It's about your development of thoughts, right? And it's about picking apart chronologically all the nuances of communication, why people are communicating, how they're communicating, and what effects it has on everyone else in that context, right? So, syntax, you should aim to mention as many of the sentence types by the time you finish your AC, right? Because they, very likely that they will be present. Obviously, know your clause structures. You might come across bizarre clause structures. Definitely know your sentence structures, though. Very important to know sentence structures because they'll come up in every single text is going to have sentence structure. Every single text will have sentence structures, right? So know exactly how to analyze the difference between a compound sentence and a complex sentence. And I'm not just telling you guys this and telling you to go off on your own. I've actually given you the information to do this. If we go here and you look at my notes and you find it, look at this. Sentence structures. I've directly shown you guys what they do and how to find them. And so sentence fragments, anything without a verb. Potato cakes, 3 for $1. Simple will just be subject, verb, object, or maybe just subject and verb. I bought 3 potato cakes. A compound sentence is 2 main clauses that can stand alone. I bought 7 fish and he bought 8 dogs. Complex sentences might have a main clause, a subordinate clause, and that how that looks is the man who works at the fish and chip shop made the potato cakes for me. The who works at a fish and chip shop doesn't exist on its own, right? And so how would I talk about that? I would talk about it as the complex sentence, which utilizes a subordinate clause, aims to put less emphasis and weight on the fact that the man has his employment at the shop, right? This might be because that piece of information is less relevant than the other information in the sentence, right? That could be combined with a heightened tempo. And maybe you can say, and this is in combination with a heightened tempo in order to filter through less important information at a higher speed, which can increase the level of clarity and communication in this conversation with a referential function. Like this spider web is limitless. Like you can link everything to everything. And the more nuanced that you can make your explanations, the more examiners will appreciate it, right? So obviously, know exactly how to analyze the differences between um, um, analyze different sentence structures and their strategic uses, right? Language is all about strategic use. I will keep reinforcing that. Now, um, nominalization is almost a guarantee in written form, right? Um, Nominalization is almost a guarantee in written form, right? Keep that in mind. Almost a guarantee. Um, Coordination, subordination, active voice is a guarantee. Passive voice is incredibly high yield, right? Um, Syntax is objectively the highest yield category of subsystem, right? And that is because I mean I'd say syntax and discourse both together, right? Syntax and discourse are objectively the highest yield categories of subsystems, right? Highest yield subsystems to analyze because they are so inevitable. But so are word classes, right? But there's a difference between the morphology of word classes and the inevitability of syntax and discourse, right? And that is they have significant impact and influence on the actual communication. So syntax and discourse are the most salient while being extremely inevitable to the functionality of any piece of communication in human existence, right? So very important to keep that in mind, right? Yeah, like a lot of these lessons are about these little gold nuggets that I basically what I'm doing here is pouring out all of my knowledge, that all of the nuance, all the subtleties that allowed me to score what I scored. My goal is to just waterfall it out across these 20 hours so that you guys have everything that's in my brain can basically be downloaded into your brain, right? That's the goal. So think about this, right? Very important factor. And I'll just I'll make this purple to differentiate it, right? Um, Now, further as part of syntax, right? Things like coordination, subordination are inevitable. Coordination and subordination are pretty much inevitable. So know them like the back of your hand. I mean, know everything like the back of your hand. Just know which ones are also inevitable, as I'm telling you. Active voice equals inevitable, but finding passive voice equals rare and high yield, rare, impressive, and high yield, I'll say. And then um, these three, a part of syntactic patterning, are huge. Syntactic patterning, like if it's just such a high yield salient feature to be able to discuss. Very important to be able to discuss them, right? Hold on a second. It won't let me. What's happening? Let's go back. There we go. Yeah, incredibly high yield. Syntactic patterning, know like the back of your hand. Uh, right. Now, as for discourse, how do we discuss nominalization and passive voice? Great question. So, nominalization and passive voice are two factors that depersonalize the text by focusing on concepts that are abstract rather than individual actions. So, what do I actually mean by that? Let's have this discussion. So, nominalization, passive voice. Um, to actually talk through what they really are, look at this. We go to syntax. Um, I can't quite find it, but I'll explain it here myself. So nominalization, the process of turning any word, usually a verb, into a noun, usually an adjective or a verb, right? Usually into a noun. For example, transforming the action of the action to smell or the action to let's say the action to judge becomes the the noun judgment, right? The noun judgment, which is the concept of judgment, right? As opposed to the individual action of judging, right? So This heightens register, it depersonalizes the text and exploits the abstract nature of of the of the concept of the concept to judge, right? Um, Haydn's register depersonalizes the text, exploits the abstract nature of the concept to judge. And if you can talk about these little sections of focusing on the concept as opposed to the individual action, you've mastered nominalization. Passive voice has two types. You have agent and you have agentless, right? Think secret agent, right? Um, think secret agent is unknown, right? Secret agent is known, secret agent is unknown. For example, I might have the sentence, the cake was eaten by Josh. But I could also say the cake was eaten, full stop. So the difference here is this in analysis, right? Agentless, by concealing the identity of the subject, we can produce suspense, slash, it can be a strategic decision if it's not appropriate to name a subject, or rather to name the perpetrator. Think of it like that. By considering the identity of who ate the cake, we can produce suspense. It can be a strategic decision if it's not appropriate to name the perpetrator, or the name of who did it, or rather, the knowledge of who ate the cake might just be, might just not be a priority, right? Might not be a priority, and thus a waste of attention and energy. Now, agent, this rearrangement, which still depicts the perpetrator, aims to simply shift attention strategically as the cake being eaten is significantly more important than who ate it. Or you may attempt to build suspense this way, right? So these are the different perspectives we can take. When explaining White Haydn's register, formal by nature, but you could say that um, by by being more abstract and depersonalized, social distance, a greater social distance is created. Greater social distance is created. Heightening register and formality. You can say it like that. That should help. Beautiful. And so these are really high yield concepts that I want you guys to think about and bring up in your ACs, right? In your exam, especially, it can make a world of a difference, right? Now, hold on a second. All right. We've gone through that. Now, very briefly, semantics. In terms of semantics, sorry, hold on a second. We're not done with discourse. That's what I was thinking. All right. So we're done with syntax. Now, as for discourse, we've talked about how spoken strategies and features of spoken discourse are basically guaranteed in anything that's spoken. Now, of course, know everything like the back of your hand in this table. But as for written texts, right? Coherence and cohesion are guaranteed as well, right? So you must know them. You must know exactly how to talk about them, right? Especially logical ordering, because everything is ordered to some degree with some level of strategy, right? Now, formatting is pretty much guaranteed. Inference is the only one that's not so much guaranteed. If it is formal written, then consistency and convention is guaranteed for sure, right? There will be, some form of date in the top corner, or some heading with strategic bold formatting, right? Bold formatting that allows for greater coherence. right? And comprehensibility, right? These are all given. Cohesion is a little bit, cohesion is definitely also guaranteed, but it's a little harder to find, right? So hold on a second. As for coherence, and I'll just move these one forward. Now, as for cohesion, oh, move it one forward, right? So once again, there's a few that are pretty much guaranteed, right? Conjunctions and adverbials are pretty much guaranteed, um, because you're definitely going to have the word and at some point. And if you have the word and, that means you have a sentence structure that's at the very least compound, if not compound complex. Wow. And if you have adverbials, like a front-focused adverbial or an end-focused adverbial, you very likely have some form of complex or compound complex sentence. So notice how these things go hand in hand. And that's why I said that syntax and discourse should run in bundles. They are in combination the most high yield. Information flow is guaranteed because information flow literally just means the development and communication of information, right? So as for cohesion, right, conjunctions and adverbials are guaranteed, which if the word if the word and is used, right, or if the conjunction, I'll be more specific myself, if the conjunction and is used, you must instantly think to relate it to sentence structures and strategic weighting of information, right? Slash adverbials, which are likely front or end focused, linking together, which also intrinsically link to complex sentence structures. Wow. So notice how the spider web is so deeply connected. It's your job to depict that spider web. Now, anaphoric and cataphoric referencing are pretty, high yield and come up pretty often. Repetition and some form of hyponymy is, because they're probably going to use words from the same semantic field that have some form of hierarchy, right? So anaphoric, cataphoric, repetition, synonymy if they variate the same words multiple times across a formal written text, quite standard, quite expected. Um, so there would also be anaphoric and cataphoric referencing a common if there is any mentioning of people in a given text by pronouns, right? He, she, they, etc. At the same time, synonymy, very common in formal written because we must variate our words. By the way, shout out to wordhippo.com here because it'll allow you to have, a broad vocabulary as a very well put together thesaurus. Um, and obviously because we must vary out our words in order to sound professional, and for our writing, in order to sound professional and high level in that regard. Um, The rest are not so much guaranteed or extremely high probability, but once again, that's why it's important to know what is really high probability. Um, these are really high probability. These are like non-negotiables. If they're there, they're salient, and at some point you should mention them. And of course, know everything else as well, because if you can pick out the ones that are not very common, right, the examiners will love that. Now remember, the goal is to have something like 18 unique metalanguage terms used across 4 to 5 subsystems, which you can use 4 to 5 subsystems. I know for a fact that I used 5 in my exam, even though it was written. I found an instance of some form of rhythm, or some form of rhyme, sorry, which I actually talked about in regards to assonance and parallelism, some form of this triangle here, which would have been rare because people just avoid phonetics and phonology because it's a written text. But these can still be in written texts because when you read them, you end up phonologically patterning in yourself in your own right, right? So, now in terms of these options here, I mean, we already talked about how openings and closings are pretty much guaranteed, and so are discourse particles. Let me just double check that you guys have that. Yes, yes, yes. Discourse particles, nice. Okay. Now we can move to semantics. So as for semantics, my guide to it that I would want you guys to know, abide by, and that I recommend. Got a question here. Since the last year's AC text was a spoken text, do you think it'll be written this year? Well, that's normally how it goes, right? I think there's a chance that the AC is both written and spoken. I think that's a possibility. Because they trialed the idea in 2021 with short answer to have a written and spoken combination mode, which is beautiful. It means you have to talk about all five subsystems, and if you don't, you can't get a roll 50, right? Or at least get a 14 out of 15 or above, right? Because getting a roll 50 relies on the other sections as well. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that this year's AC is probably either written or written and spoken together, right? Especially because it's a new study design year, they might take a risk just to trial something to kind of narrow things down for the coming years. Now, as for semantics, by far, right, the most common is synonymy. Wow. Notice how synonymy, which is in discourse, is also in semantics. So we've just guaranteed the ability to talk about all five subsystems if you get really good at identifying things that are quite common. The most common is synonymy by far, right? Now, metaphors are relatively common. Irony slash puns come into play if the transcript is informal. And the mode actually doesn't matter here specifically. Either way, it's perfectly fine. Um, Euphemisms and dysphemisms are great to talk about in your ACs, right? In terms of the sheer amount of nuanced purposes, intents, functions, contextual factors that they can link to, right? And I would say that that's pretty, and I mean, look, denotation and connotation are there too, but it's not that relevant. You're not really going to come across denotation and connotation. I mean, unless you want to, I mean, connotation is a guarantee, denotation not so much, right? So connotation is guaranteed to be there in pretty much every transcript slash text they give you. Denotation is literally just uh, using words without intention for them to have any impact on the communicated connotation. Um, this is really the difference. Connotation is very high yield, and I'd actually say you have to mention it in every AC at some point, right? It's a must mention. This is a must mention. Denotation, not so much. Beautiful. So at this stage, I want to go back here and I want to look at this transcript. But do we have any queries, concerns, questions, anxieties, worries? How are we feeling? What have we picked up on? Can we all consolidate something we've learned? Just one thing that you've picked up on, one takeaway so far from today's lesson, right? It's a huge content dump. There's a lot to take into account. There's a lot of practice that you guys need to do. These things don't come easy, right? You have to practice, you have to listen, you have to put everything into play. Laura says, talk about all the subsystems. Absolutely. The broader the breadth in combination with the depth, the higher your mark, right? Can you only talk about phonological features such as assonance if there is a poetic function? No, 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 no. Assonance, assonance can very well have a poetic function and pretty much always does. Bao, I would say that, in my opinion, you have to talk about at least four subsystems. Think about it like that. You have to talk about at least four subsystems, in my opinion. I mean, I want you guys to have the ability to get Raw 45 plus, right? Raw 45 plus needs at least four subsystems. Put yourself in the interlocutor's shoe to fully immerse yourself in the language they use. Examples can be used across multiple subsystems, absolutely. And that's where the spider web comes into play. Showing examiners duality in the purposes you'll discuss, as well as talking about at least four subsystems. Good, we're learning. This is good stuff. Really well done. Really well done. Really well done. Really well done. A deeper understanding of the different metalinguistic terms in study design, solidarity, intimacy. We should be including all subsystems and lots of them to relate to each other. Yes, because it's all about the interconnections, the spider web. Depict the spider web nicely. Don't focus on one little corner. A real life application to achieve depth in paragraphs. Beautiful. Knowing all the salient features and how to analyze them in any text. Beautiful. Exactly. Well done. Let me just approve the note requests for Chloe. All right. Yes, knowing the meta language from all the subsystems, absolutely. And it's important to do so. If you, I mean, if you guys, and no matter what your SAC marks were, even if you averaged in the 50s and 60s, you can absolutely still get a raw 40, which scales to a 43. Right? Being able to look for the obvious features that are expected, that you can pre-prepare for, that you'll go in there knowing that they're going to be there, while combining it with little nuances like, hold on a second, given that this is a phone call setting, understanding the fact that paralinguistic features cannot very much be present there. Beautiful. Perfect. So, as a bit of as a bit of almost, oh, actually, hold on. There's some things that I want to briefly cover here. Which are slightly higher priority. This is all fine. Now, just to make sure, coherence and cohesion, their importance and functions in the real world, right? Um, Coherence and cohesion are quite different. But cohesion is a part of coherence. Coherence is overarching. Coherence is when you look at a building from a distance, does that building look like a valid structure, right? From a distance. But then when you go up close, is it cracked between the bricks? That's the cohesion. Cohesion is the glue between the bricks that make up a building. Coherence is the whole building. It's the facade, right? And so in the real world, coherence and cohesion are really important for clarity. Now, connotation is the ideas that are communicated through a certain style or use of language. Power and prestige have something to do with status and credibility and respect in society. Overt and covert on the outside, on the inside, in public settings, in private settings, respectively. And norms, attitudes, and identities, which we discussed yesterday, just making sure that you guys know what they are and all the meta language that we've gone through. These are things that are imperative for scoring above Raw 45, right? You need a deep understanding of all these terms, and you need to remember to talk about as much of these terms as possible at least once, or at some point, ideally once, across your AC on the exam. Can you talk about how cohesive aspects and then writing a paragraph about coherence? Absolutely, I can. Now, in order for me to do this, what I'm actually going to do, um, I'm going to take you guys to my year 7 to 10 tutoring suite. This is for year 7 to 10, actually. Could I write my own analysis to the activity we did at the start, please? Yes, I can. And very quickly, let me show you guys this. We're done with all the content and the slides for today, actually, which is good. But let me show you guys this. So when we have coherence and cohesion, right? Let me talk you guys through this lesson, these two lessons. Um, so. So coherence, right, is whether something from a distance looks easy enough to understand. So you ask yourself, does this wall look like a brick wall from a distance? If so, then it's coherent. So coherent, right, is to be logical and consistent. But what about an article? So notice how an article looks structurally like an article from a distance. If it does, it's coherent. It's got an intro, it's got a body paragraph, it's got its conclusion and action. Now, sometimes something can be coherent, right? It looks logical and consistent from the outside, but it lacks cohesion. It's not connected well on the inside. It's falling apart. But from the outside, it looks like this. It's very coherent, but it's not got very good cohesion. Therefore, if this article was fully gibberish, it would be a lack of cohesion. But because on the outside, it looks perfectly fine like an article, if we can't read what it says, it's perfectly coherent. And that's why we want to focus on the bigger picture here. So if I think now we think about cohesion, So cohesion is the mechanics of language up close. It's about placing each brick, each word, each phrase, each sentence strategically for emphatic communication. And so anything that is cohesive must contribute to coherence. So in essence, something can be coherent, but not cohesive. So anything that's cohesive has to be coherent. Oh, wait, can you guys see my screen? Oh my God, you're not seeing my screen. There we go. Hold on. This is what I'm trying to show you guys. Yeah, yeah. This is what I meant by my year 7 to 10 tutoring suite. So once again, coherent, something from the outside looks easy enough to understand. If it looks like a brick wall from a distance, it's coherent, logical and consistent. Or this article, right? Um, if it looks structurally like an article from a distance, it's coherent. It's got an intro, a body, and action. Now, sometimes something can be coherent on the outside, but lack cohesion on the inside. It can look like this on the outside, look like this on the inside. So therefore, right, if this article was fully gibberish, when we zoom in, it would lack cohesion, but it would still be coherent from the outside because coherence is about the bigger picture. Now, when we think about cohesion, it's about the glue between the bricks. So cohesion is the mechanics of language up close. You zoom in, right? Each word, each phrase, each sentence, each brick, strategically for emphatic communication, for example. So anything that's cohesive has to contribute to coherence. It makes things more understandable. Not everything that is necessarily coherent is going to be cohesive. So anything that's cohesive must contribute to coherence. But something can be coherent but not cohesive. So I can tell that this is still a brick wall, even though it's poorly stuck together. It has poor cohesion, it's not well glued, but I know it's a brick wall. Um, Now, I wanted to look at this text briefly for a couple of minutes and just walk you guys through what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at it. I'm seeing prosodic features. I'm seeing laughter. Oh, easy to talk about straight away. I'm seeing declaratives. At some point, I'm seeing differences in tempo, differences in volume, emphatic stress, pitch changes, elongated emphasis, right? How to make ACs, I've got a question here. How to make your ACs not generic then if everything is pre-memorized? The way to do that, Justin, is this. It's not, it's definitely not that everything is pre-memorized, right? It's sections of it you come in knowing how to analyze, but then you add little bits like this. Given that this setting is on a phone call where paralinguistic features cannot be present, you can't memorize something like this. This is your live on-the-spot analysis that separates you from other students. So it's about the little moments like this that make you unique compared to others, right? Or if you look at this sample paragraph, right? So yes, everyone memorizes that establishing authority and credibility are in social purposes, and but in light to portray myself as a responsible teacher is where the difference comes from, right? How do I make my own ACs more cohesive? I feel like I'm just listing features and elaborations. If you want to make your own writing more cohesive, learn to use these features. Use conjunctions and adverbials strategically. Use front focus and focus, which means use more commas, right? Use synonymy in your writing. Use strategic repetition. Use collocations. Make sure that your writing is logically ordered, formatted well, and the information flows. So use factors of cohesion to make your own writing better. Now, that is a huge point. And Carissa's just said hashtag apply your knowledge because it's true. Guys, true mastery in English language is found when you use everything we learn to analyze as your own ammunition in your own writing. Does that make sense? Like English language, everything you learn to analyze isn't just to analyze, it's also for you guys to use in your own writing, right? So like take these and run with it and manipulate the examiners by using these features in your own writing, right? Um, Hold on a second. Now, as for my analysis to this little section, my response, right? For example, to the first one, I would very much say something like, I would start it with, given that Sapanta is in a position of responsibility regarding the academic development of his students, um, it is his responsibility to communicate with parents referentially for in order to clarify their child's behavioral needs. Full stop. Now I'll develop it with by using the negatively connoted lexemes irresponsible and incompetent, right? And in fact, I could say the suffixed negatively connoted lexemes, right? Um, and we can say lexeme because we've said these things, but you could say adjectives, right? Irresponsible and incompetent, never negatively connotated adjectives, irresponsible and incompetent. Sapanta might simultaneously, or might let's say threaten the positive face needs of the parents who may feel they are a reflection of their child's shortcomings. Full stop. Simultaneously, this circumnavigation of the child's of the child in contacting the parents directly might make the feel might make the student feel neglected um, and 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 imposed upon, threatening negative face needs. That's how I would analyze it. This is like perfect score level analysis, I would say. Um, and I'll make that pink. Beautiful. Well, I'm going to stop the recording there. Thank you, everyone.